to everybody who's attending today. For me in Cyprus, it's 11:30 a.m. in the morning. I know for many of you it's already the afternoon, some of you the evening, but maybe some of you over towards the west, it's still early morning. But wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for joining today. And I hope this is going to be a useful talk today about future learners and the fact that future learners need learning strategies. Just very quickly, my name is Peter Lucantoni, and I work as the Professional Learning and Development Manager in the MENA region, that's the Middle East and North Africa, but I actually live and I'm based in Cyprus. I've been involved in English language teaching, initially, of course, as a teacher. A few years later, I had my own language school, which was also a teacher training centre. Then I moved into teacher training. I've also written books, and I've also managed schools as well. But now I work for Cambridge University Press as the Professional Learning and Development Manager. So I have a role which is very similar to the one that Alan has. I also have a background with Cambridge Assessment, with TKT and CELT-YL and CELTA. I'm a trainer for all of those. And I used to be a Delta trainer and also an assessor for the CELT-YL. Okay, so what are we going to do this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening? Well, we're going to do four main things. First of all, we're going to have a think about learning and what learning actually is. We're also going to have a look at what a learning strategy is, and this will help us to think about the future and the challenges that learners face and reinforce how important it is for learners to have strategies. And we're going to consider what a future learner actually is, because I think we would all agree that learners change over time. Certainly if I think back to my school years, I think the way that we were taught and the way that we learned was very, very different from the way that children are taught today. I'm not saying it was better or worse 50 years ago, but it was certainly very, very different. And hopefully we'll be able to make some conclusions as well. Now, I want to keep this fairly interactive if possible, but I can see at the moment there are more than 5,000 of you joining us today, so it's going to be very difficult to look at your responses in the chat room, but let's pretend that it's interactive. And I want to begin by asking you a question, and you can think. You can do this, just with private thinking, or if you feel the urge, you can type something in the chat room. But I just want to ask you a question, and the question is this: what does the word learning actually mean to you? Now, there are no right or wrong answers, and there are no prizes and there are no marks. But if you just want to type something into the chat room in the next 30 seconds or so, that would be great. So what does the word learning mean to you? 30 seconds. Okay, already there's lots of interesting replies coming in. Great, lovely, very, very nice, very, very nice, excellent, great. Far too many for me to read, and they're coming in so quickly. It's making me go a bit dizzy, but okay, that's 30 seconds. Stop, you can stop. A lot of the things that I'm seeing in the chat box, I've seen development, I've seen ongoing, I've seen development, understanding, opportunities, and all of these, of course, are words which relate directly to the word learning and the underlying meaning of learning. So I want to begin this morning's webinar by looking at learning in a little bit more detail and going to the experts, asking some of the experts what the word learning actually means. So my webinar this morning, it's going to be a sort of a visual journey, if you like, relying on different experts for their opinions. So here's a gallery of all the people that we're going to be focusing on today. It doesn't matter if you know who anybody is on the screen, but hopefully you know who one person is in the bottom right-hand corner. You probably know who that guy is, but it doesn't matter if you don't know who all the people are. We're going to talk about them, and we're going to find out what all of these people have to say about learning. And that's how the whole of my talk this morning is going to be put together. So let's start with this gentleman over here. You may recognize him. He lived about 2,500 years ago. He was a Greek philosopher. And this, of course, is the philosopher Plato. And I'm going to put on the screen now something that Plato said, and I've missed out one word from what he said. So, of course, what I'd like you to do is type in the chat box what you think the missing word is. So what did Plato say? No, not Aristotle, not Socrates, this is Plato. So this is what Plato said: never discourage anyone who continually makes progress, no matter how what. So what do you think the missing word is? Just one word. Any ideas? You don't need to give me the name. We know it's Plato, but what about the missing word? Small. Okay. Slow. Great. Yeah. Just one word. Slow. Little. Slow. Much. Slow. Yeah. Lots of people are saying slow. Let's have a look. Yeah. Plato said slow. Never discourage anyone who continually makes progress, no matter how slow. I don't know about those of you who are with us today, but certainly in my time as a teacher, the word slow often has quite a deep negative connotation to it. When we talk about slow learners, there's almost an indication of them being weak or being inferior in some way. But I think Plato was right. It doesn't matter how slow or indeed how fast you do something. The important thing is what was your level of success. And I think we would all agree that by giving students a little bit more time, we might actually get a more positive response from them. Okay, so that's Plato. Plato talks about the speed of learning. And the next person I'd like to show you is this lady here. Again, it doesn't matter if you have no idea who it is, but this is an American lady. She was a medical physicist. In fact, in 1977, she won the Nobel Prize for Medicine, and she died about 10 years ago, and her name is Rosalind Yallow. And Rosalind Yallow said this, that the something of learning separates youth from old age. As long as you're learning, you're not old. So what do you think Rosalind Yallow said? What's the missing word in that quote? Any ideas? The something of learning. What do you think she said? Art, that's a great word. Yeah, the joy, the science. Yeah. I haven't seen the exact word yet, but I think a lot of what you're saying, they're all, possibilities. What she actually said was the excitement of learning separates youth from old age. And this I think, is key to what we do in our profession, isn't it? That we want our students, we want our learners to be excited. How many times do we use the word fun when we're talking about our lessons and our planning and the course books that we use? Many course books even have fun in the title. I don't think we should ever believe that fun means that learning is going on, but I think fun is an integral part of helping learning to actually take place. So Rosalind Yallow, the excitement of learning separates youth from old age, and as long as you're learning, you're not old. Okay, my next person that I want to refer to is this guy here. It's very difficult to find out very much about this gentleman. His name is Tom Whitby, but no matter how many times I search on the internet, I can find out very little information. I have no idea where he was born, although I know he's American. I don't know when he was born. I assume he's still living because he has a current blog. But all I can find is that he's an American author and a blogger and consultant. But what's more important, of course, is what he said. And once again, there's a missing word. So this is Tom Whitby. Teaching kids how to learn becomes more important than teaching them what to learn when the blank is lifelong learning. So what do you think the blank is? Plan, goal, process, goal, life, aim, object. Excellent, brilliant, you've got it. Yeah, he used the word goal, but aim or even objective, those are all fine. So teaching kids how to learn becomes more important than teaching them what to learn if we're considering lifelong learning. And I think you would agree this fits nicely with the topic of my talk today, which is about future learners needing learning strategies. And of course, that links in with the how in Tom Whitby's quote here. What's more important nowadays is not what we're teaching them, but how the children or even the adults are actually going through that learning process. And the fourth one I want to show you, just to wrap up the first part of this webinar, is from this gentleman here. This is John Gardner, who was an American politician when President Lyndon Johnson, when Lyndon Johnson was president during the 1960s. And John Gardner was the Secretary of Education during President Johnson's presidency. John Gardner died about 20 years ago now. But John Gardner said this, and I think this is a very important point and impacts significantly on all aspects of learning. So again, what's the blank in John Gardner's quote? One of the reasons people stop learning is that they become less and less willing to risk what? What do you think he said? What's the missing word? What do you think he... Goal time, yeah, I can see a couple of it. I can see a couple. Failure, yeah, failure. So one of the reasons people stop learning is that they become less and less willing to risk failure. And I think, I'm sure many of you in the room have learned English as a second or as a third language, and you'll know that the reason that you're so competent with your language skills now is because you took risks during your learning journey. And it's the same with everything that we do, everything we're trying to achieve in life. If we're prepared to take risks, then we have a greater chance of being successful, because of course we learn from our mistakes. Okay, so we've looked at four experts, if you like, who have something to say about learning. So let's just relax with this lovely picture. And this picture is in the presentation because it's showing us, I think, many different things. It's showing us a path. It's showing us a journey, if you like, into the future. It's also showing us, I think, something which is rather risky, because I'm sure that bridge will sway from side to side when you step on it. So there's a degree of risk in the picture as well. But I'm using this picture to introduce my fifth person, which is this gentleman here. Some of you may recognize who this is. I think it's a lovely photograph. Look at his glasses, if you haven't noticed that he's got his glasses upside down. He's obviously a wonderful person. Imagine having him as your grandfather or your great-grandfather. He must be an amazing person. But this is a very famous person. This is Jerome Bruner, who I'm sure many of you have come across. He was an American cognitive psychologist and educator, and look at his age. He lived to the ripe old age of 101. What an amazing person! And he's there because Jerome Bruner said this: that learning should not only take us somewhere, it should allow us later to go further more easily. I'll just give you 10-15 seconds to read that for yourselves. So learning is about a journey. Learning is about a path. It's about discovery. But if I understand the quote correctly, I think perhaps Jerome Bruner was saying that some of the learning that goes on doesn't actually take people anywhere. Perhaps it takes them to the test, which they have the next day. But beyond that, it doesn't actually help them at all. So mechanical, rote learning, the type of learning which is just regurgitating facts, is not really taking anybody anywhere. And it certainly doesn't allow us later to go further more easily. So learning should be not just about the here and the now, but learning should also be about giving us the ability to go further more easily in the future. So what then is a learning strategy? And again, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds if you just like to put some responses in the chat box. What do you think a learning strategy is? What words or phrases come to mind with this? Any ideas? Continuous process. Great. Okay, never stop. Yeah. Any other ideas about a learning strategy? What's a learning strategy? It's continuous, it's planned. Great. Yeah. Nice ideas. Planning, learning, methods. Yep. Tactics. Brilliant. Yeah. Really great ideas. And just a few things that you may have thought of. A learning strategy is definitely some sort of process, some sort of procedure, some sort of approach, if you like, and it's definitely a pathway. But of course, the key, I think, with learning strategies is that ultimately we use the learning strategy in order to achieve a goal, and we'll be looking at some examples of that as we go through the rest of this webinar. So let's have a look at what the experts have to say about learning strategies. And I want to begin with this gentleman here. This is not Plato again. This is another Greek philosopher. I think some of you said earlier that Plato was Sophocles. Well, this time it is Sophocles. And what Sophocles said, and unbelievably, he said this 2,500 years ago. And I think when you see what he said, just bear that in mind. He said this, or he wrote it, 2,500 years ago. And it links into what we're all talking about nowadays in the 21st century. So the words I've taken from Sophocles are these, that one must learn by doing the thing, for though you think you know it, you have no certainty until you try. And I think what Sophocles is talking about here is active learning, learn by doing, 2,500 years ago. So active learning, learn by doing, none of these are new methods or new approaches, or they've been around for thousands and thousands of years. So one must learn by doing the thing, for though you think you know it, you have no certainty until you try. And this gentleman here, anybody recognize this guy? This is Benjamin Franklin. And of course, Benjamin Franklin was one of the founding fathers, drafted the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. And the reason that Benjamin Franklin is on the screen is because he said this, and you may recognize this as a Chinese proverb. It's actually very difficult to find the original provenance of this, so you may recognize it as being from somewhere else, but I've researched it quite a lot, and it always seems to come back to Benjamin Franklin, but whatever. He said this, he said, tell me and I forget. Tell me and I forget. And you probably can guess what the second line is. Teach me and I may remember. So immediately we're looking at a difference between tell and teach and forget and remember. But the third part of the quote, the most important part for us, I think, and what we're talking about today, is involve me and I learn. So tell me something and I'll probably forget it, lecture style. Teach me and I may remember. So some sort of interaction, but involve me on a practical level. Encourage me to learn by doing things, then of course I will learn more. I will retain whatever it is that I've learned. And at this point, I think it's good now to turn more to our profession, our English language teaching profession, our area of expertise. And I want to begin by looking at this gentleman here. This is a gentleman called Vivian Cook, who is a UK professor of linguistics, I think at Newcastle University in the UK, but I could be wrong. But Vivian Cook talks specifically about learning strategies, and he says this, that a learning strategy refers to a choice that the learner makes while learning or using language. Now, I've put the word choice in bold. That wasn't, that's not what Vivian Cook did. I've used the bold for the word choice. And I think it's really important that we as educators remember that if learners don't have choices, then they can only follow one path. And the key to success in learning, the key to success in developing any skill is by making choices. So it's very important that we build up learners, if you like, portfolio of different choices so that they can select whatever they think is the right way of doing something in order to be successful. And of course, just stepping outside of learning for a moment, think about anything and everything that you do every day. Everything is based on making choices. Shall I do this or do that? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? What's my success rate likely to be? So it's thinking about the best way, not necessarily the quickest way, but possibly the most effective way to actually be successful. Which brings me to a lady from the University of Cambridge who works in the Faculty of Education, Madeleine Hunter. Madeleine Hunter made this point, that expecting all children the same age to learn from the same materials is like expecting all children the same age to wear the same size clothing. One size doesn't fit all. I think I just noticed in the chat box somebody mentioned differentiation, recognizing that people are different, learners are different, and people need to learn and to indeed to be taught in different ways. So expecting all children the same age to learn from the same materials is like expecting all children the same age to wear the same clothing. It's just not going to happen. And that brings me to this gentleman here. 30 seconds in the chat box. Who is this? I haven't seen his name yet, but maybe there's a time lag. Anybody know who this is? Still haven't seen his name. Very, very famous. Works for Cambridge University Press as an author, based in New Zealand. I can see it. Jack Richards. Yeah, no, not Peter. It's not me. No. I'm much better looking than that. This is Jack Richards, who was born in the early 1940s, and he's I would say, the world authority on second language acquisition and indeed on the theories behind materials design. And of course, he's written a host of very, very popular course books, including Interchange, Four Corners, and so on and so forth. I'm going to show you what Jack said, but I've scrambled the words. So we have a sentence anagram, a word anagram, and you have to unscramble the words to work out what Jack Richards said. So I'm going to give you 45 seconds to unjumble the words in red to make a meaningful sentence. And the 45 seconds starts now. 45 seconds. What did Jack Richards say? One complete sentence. You've got 15 seconds left and I haven't seen an answer yet. Any ideas? What did Jack Richards say? I've got one answer. It's nearly correct. Yeah, a couple of correct answers coming in. Yes. Excellent. Well done. Okay, time's up. Don't worry if you didn't get it. But Jack Richards said that a learning strategy is what learners do to achieve successful learning. And if you just think back to the quote we saw from Vivian Cook said that a learning strategy refers to a choice that the learner makes while learning or using language. Richards is saying that what learners do to achieve successful learning. So the key in both of the quotes that we've looked at is the word learning. So our two experts, Vivian Cook and Jack Richards, are both saying that in order to be successful, in order to learn, then we need learning strategies. We need to be making choices about how to become successful. And just returning to Vivian Cook to see something else that he said. Vivian Cook said that people who are good at languages might tackle L2, their second language or their third language or a language they're learning apart from their primary language. They might tackle second language learning in different ways from those who are less good, or they might behave in the same way but more efficiently. I'll just give you 10, 15 seconds to read that slowly. And I think even though we're language experts here today, and this is all about language, I think we could change the word languages for cooking, playing the piano, climbing mountains. That doesn't really matter what the skill is, but he's making the point that if you're good at something, then you're likely to approach learning and development in different ways than those who are less good, or you might behave in the same way but more efficiently. In other words, if you're good at doing something, you probably have built up strategies which have made you good at that particular skill, whether it's learning a language or, making chocolate cake or whatever it might be. So learning strategies are absolutely essential, particularly for people who are developing and those who are above the average. Okay, let's have another famous face. I'm sure you know this person. Answers in the chat box. Anybody know who this is? This British guy born in the mid-1940s, teacher trainer, materials writer. His most famous book, I think, is The Practice of English Language Teaching. Any idea? His first name begins with the letter J. J for jam. Nobody. Harmer. Yeah, Jeremy Harmer. Excellent. Good. Jeremy's here because Jeremy Harmer said this. And I think this brings everything together that we've been saying. Jeremy Harmer says the teacher has to encourage students to develop learning strategies. And this will involve actually training students to behave in certain ways. How many times have you said to your students, no, don't do that, skim the text? When you see that your students are finger reading, pointing at the words and reading slowly, how many times have you said to them, I want you to skim the text, or I want you to scan the text, or I want you to underline the key words, or I want you to do this, or I want you to read the questions before you read the text, or I want you to read the text before you read the questions, or whatever it might be. Yeah? How many times have we all done that? Millions of times. And what we're doing is we're actually training students to behave in certain ways. And the reason we're doing that is because we're the experts, we know what works, and we know what doesn't work. Now, the more we do that, the more we're building up the students' options or choices, as Vivian Cook called it. Yeah? We're providing the students with the strategies that they need. We're not born with these strategies. These strategies have to be taught. We have to develop these strategies with our students and help them to understand which ones are going to be more effective than others. Of course, when students become more confident, they can make their own choices. Students might say to you, no, I don't want to do it like that. I want to do it like this. And you may say to them, well, why? And a confident student will say, because I prefer doing it this way, or it works better for me this way, or whatever the reason might be. Just take a simple example. If you have a group of children in the classroom and you say, I want you to find and underline 5 key words in a paragraph, for example. Students will do this in different ways. Some will just get a pencil and circle the word. Others will underline it. Others will take out a ruler and underline in a neat way. Some students will have 6 different highlighter pens in their pencil case, and they'll use different colors to highlight different words, and so on and so forth. And of course, other students won't even bother. So every student will be approaching the task that you've given them in different ways. So in reality, what does this mean? Let's have a look at one more famous person. I don't know if you recognize this gentleman here. Any idea who it is? Who's that on your screen? No, Jeremy Harmer's gone. This is somebody different now. Alan. Yeah, you all know Alan. Okay, I've probably made Alan's day. Okay, so Alan might ask himself a question, and his question might be this: what do I need to do to answer this question? And of course, all students do this. All students are constantly asking themselves, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do in order to find the answer, in order to be successful? Now, if a student doesn't have any options, if a student doesn't have any learning strategies, then they don't come up with an answer. But the more we train students, the more we encourage students, the more students develop their learning strategies, the more they'll be able to come up with these options. So for this type of question, maybe I need to skim. because I'm just looking for, a rough idea of what the passage is about. No, actually, I need to scan because I need to find details. I need to find dates and times and colors and places and names and so on and so forth. But the question is asking me not to write one word, but to write my notes. So I need to think about how I can do that. Can I go online? Can I use online resources and so on? So when students ask themselves these questions, like, what do I need to do? We want students to go through the list of options. It's like being in a restaurant and going through a menu. What do I need to do to satisfy my hunger? Do I need 3 courses or 2 courses? Do I need to have spaghetti, or do I need to have soup or rice or whatever it might be? Just as another example, Alan might ask himself how he can understand more when he listens. Maybe Alan is having problems when he has to listen to something, when the teacher says listen and answer. So what we want Alan to do is to ask himself those, to go through his options, which might be, maybe I need to memorize something, or maybe if I just did something physical, like relaxing more and focusing, maybe there are too many distractions which I need to remove. Maybe I need to change my approach. Maybe I need more of a top-down approach, not listening for words, but listening for the general idea of whatever it is that the speaker is saying. So without these strategies, without these options, without this menu, learners are definitely going to be at a disadvantage. And just to bring us back to reality, and here's a beautiful picture of Cambridge and the River Cam. I wonder how many of you have ever been there. I'm sure we'd all like to be there now, sitting by that river. But I want to just show you something else that Jerome Bruner said, which is this, that thinking about thinking has to be a principal ingredient of any empowering practice of education. In other words, if we want students to be empowered through education, we've got to encourage students to think about what they're learning, to think about thinking. And that brings me into the future and the challenges that not only students are facing, but we as the educators are facing. So I want to introduce you to this gentleman over here. This is Andreas Schleicher. And Andreas Schleicher works at the OECD. Now, the OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And Andreas Schleicher is the director in the Directorate of Education and Skills. And the reason I have put Andreas Schleicher on the screen is because he wrote a fascinating paper called The Case for 21st Century Learning. And it's obviously a lengthy document, and I'm not saying that we should all be reading it, but I've taken out some of the key things which I think are particularly relevant. Steve Martin, somebody says, no, it's not Steve Martin. This is definitely Andreas Schleicher. Anyway, Andreas Schleicher said this. He said that a generation ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, teachers could expect that what they taught would last their students a lifetime. A generation ago, teachers could expect that what they taught would last their students a lifetime. Things didn't change as much as they do nowadays. We didn't used to have such rapid economic and social change 50, 40 years ago. Things were slower for many different reasons, which we don't have time to talk about today. But he's saying that today, the 21st century, because of all the rapid economic and social change, schools, universities, colleges, educators, we have to prepare students for certain things. And he talks about 3 main things that we, the educators, need to prepare our students for. So the 3 things that he talks about are, first of all, something beginning with J. What do you think the first thing is? Just quickly type in the chat box. What do we have to prepare students for? Something beginning with J. Not jelly, not jam, not juice. Jobs. Yeah, Bhargav is saying jobs. Okay, great. Yeah. But not just any job. Andreas Schleicher is saying that what we need to be doing is preparing students for jobs that haven't actually yet been created. So what a task that is. We, the educators, and indeed the parents, we're trying to prepare students for jobs that haven't actually yet been created. Now, if we had more time, I would ask you to come up with some examples, but you don't need to. But I'm sure you'd be able to think of plenty of examples of jobs that haven't yet been created, or at least that have been created very, very recently. The second thing that he said we need to prepare for is a word beginning with T. Any ideas? The dots are not the number of letters. It's just to show you that it's not a complete word. So any idea about T? Time, talent, tasks, no. Train, no. Train, tackle, no. TEC, technology. Yeah, excellent, good. So he says that we also need to prepare our students for technologies that have not yet been invented. So as with the jobs, we're trying to prepare students for jobs that don't yet exist. We're trying to prepare students for technologies that haven't yet been invented. And the third one, beginning with P, any ideas? Third one, beginning with P. Any ideas for P? People, preferences, preventer, peace, professional, pace, prepared. Okay, yep. Haven't seen the word yet. He actually talks about problems, and he says problems that we don't yet know will actually arise. So when you think about it, our job as educators, we're facing an incredible challenge, just as great as the challenge that our learners are facing. How can we prepare students for jobs that haven't been created, technologies that haven't been invented yet, and problems that we don't know will arise? But there is light at the end of the tunnel, because Schleicher goes on to say that, of course, we can be successful. Of course, we can meet the challenge. Of course, we can prepare students, but only if we are flexible. And he makes the point that success will go to those individuals and countries that are swift to adapt, slow to resist, and open to change. And the task of educators, that's us, and the policymakers, that's the government, the administration, is to help countries to rise to the challenge. So there's no point in resisting or being slow with change. If we don't adapt to situations, then we won't be successful. And I think I haven't mentioned COVID-19 yet since I've been talking to you, but this is a point where I'm going to mention it, and I just hope you're all safe and keeping well. But if you think about the way that the world has reacted, certainly the world of education, how we've reacted to the challenge of COVID-19, I think you would all agree that we've been very swift to adapt. We haven't resisted, and we have been open to change, and we have had to look at how we do things differently. I mean, this webinar series that Alan and his team have put together is an amazing example of how we've been very quick to adapt and open to doing things differently. So Schleicher says that our future learners need to be strategy-based learners. They need to be effective strategy-based learners. In other words, our future learners need strategies if they're going to be successful. And he breaks this down a little bit and mentions several aspects of what this means. And one of the first things he says is that a strategy-based learner is always looking at themselves. They're always monitoring what they're doing and finding the correct response. So it's a sort of, if you like, a self-evaluation of what I'm doing. And it's not good enough just to be successful. It's also asking yourself, could I have done that in a different way and been more successful? He also points out that everybody's different. We're all different as learners. We all do things in different ways. And we need to understand that just because you do it like this doesn't mean that I have to do it like this, or indeed, even if I'm able to do it like this. And we need students to understand what knowledge is and what the type of knowledge is that they're actually learning. And with this self-evaluation, with this understanding, students are then in a much better position, if you like, to apply their understanding and their self-evaluation in order to improve their performance. And a couple of other things he mentions, and I think this is, I think it's something that we're aware of, but I'm not sure that we push it enough in our language context, that we want learners to care about other people and care about the learning of others, and to understand that we actually learn better with other people. Not everybody, of course. Some people prefer to be on their own, but the vast majority of us actually prefer and perform better if we're in a social or collective, is the word that Andreas Schleicher uses. And something that we mentioned earlier when we talked about risks and failure is that we need to start learning from our own and others' mistakes. This is difficult in some situations, because we, the teachers, we, the educators, and don't take this personally, but some of us jump on mistakes and don't use them as a way of helping students to learn, but use them as a way of pointing out weaknesses. And of course, that's not the right approach. What we should be doing is, yes, identifying that maybe something is not correct and that it needs improving, but the point should be about helping students to learn from that mistakes. If students are frightened of making mistakes, then they're never going to produce any language. And the final thing I want to point out from Andreas Schleicher is that there's no point in crying about the situation that you're faced with. We need to accept the way things are, and we need to actually do something about it. There's no point in getting upset about our current situation, the current C-19. We need to do something about it. We need to respond to it. We need to find different ways of teaching and learning so that the whole learning process can continue. And obviously this means that we need different strategies. Our learners need different strategies. We, the teachers, the educators, we need different teaching strategies. We can't just jump from being in the classroom to being online and expecting things to be the same, because they're definitely not. And I'm not making a judgment call about classroom good, online bad. Absolutely not. You know, there's plenty of positive things to come out of online learning and plenty of negative things to come out of the classroom. But what we need to do is accept where we are and respond in the right way to it. Okay, so that brings me to the final part, the conclusions, really. And I thought we'd go back to this beautiful picture of Cambridge. Cambridge is like this every day, blue skies and sunshine every day of the year, 365 days of the year. So the University of Cambridge wants to do something. The University of Cambridge wants you to encourage your students to see what everyone else has seen. So not to be different, really, but to be average, to be normal, to be the same. But you can see there's a but in the middle of the screen. So the University of Cambridge wants to encourage students to see what everyone else has seen, but to think what nobody else has thought. So I'll just give you 10 seconds to have a look at that. So let's encourage students to see the things that we can all see. But what we really want is for students to start thinking the things that nobody else has thought. And an expression comes to mind, which I don't particularly like, and I try not to use it, but this idea of thinking outside the box, this higher order critical thinking, to go beyond what everybody else is thinking. So I'm going to leave you with an open question. There's no answer to, I don't have an answer for this question, but the question is on the slide. So to create future learners, what do we need to do? What should teachers be doing? If we want to create our future learners, what should we actually be doing? So that's a final thought. I have to admit that when I was putting this talk together, and I had this slide as my final thought, I then had another thought. So I'm sorry, but I have a final thought, if you don't mind. And the reason I have a final thought is because I thought it would be great to go back to where we started. And if you remember, We started off with Plato, and Mr. Plato was around 2,500 years ago. And if you remember, Plato said, never discourage anyone who continually makes progress, no matter how slow. And the reason I brought Plato back is because a couple of years ago, I was very lucky to be delivering a workshop or working with some teachers in Italy. And it was a workshop on learner strategies. So it had some similarities to what we've been talking about this morning. And as the teachers were doing an activity, I was looking at some of the notices on the classroom wall, and I saw something written in Italian, and I sort of smacked my head and thought, oh my goodness, that's absolutely amazing, because what it was another quote from Plato, but written in Italian. Now, I'm half Italian, my dad's Italian, I speak quite good Italian, so I copied it. So I'm going to put on the screen now what Plato said in Italian, and I'm going to give you 60 seconds to see if you can translate it into English without cheating by using Google Translate or any other translation engine. Just look at the words in your head and see if you can guess what Plato said. So here we are. So I'll give you about a minute, see if anybody can quickly type in the chat box what you think he said. Let me give you a word glossary. Bello means beautiful or good, positive. Rischio. I think you can guess that. Rischio means risk. Scoperta means discovery. Okay, so here it is. This is what Plato said 2,500 years ago. Plato said, there's a hidden beauty in the risk of discovery. So our learning journey, the whole point about what we've been talking about this morning, is that taking risks and discovering things, there's a beauty which underpins the whole of the learning journey, or at least there should be. At least there should be. Okay, so I'm finished. Thank you so much to all of our experts who've been involved in the webinar this morning with their thoughts and their words, including Mr. Allen down in the bottom right-hand corner there. I think we're going to have some questions and answers now, Alan, hopefully not too difficult questions.